Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of Iowa Hawkeyes Live here at the Voice of College Football on our Iowa channel. So you know what to do. Please subscribe. And, of course, specifically for this show, leave those comments and questions in the chat, and we will get to them. And, of course, our channel only exists in this show because of one Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So please head on over there. Check out Corey's work on Iowa athletics. Corey, how are you?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm about 1 week out from my surgery, so that's positive. And I know Iowa spring practice is 1 week in. I know it's a newsy day, especially on the Iowa front because of Keegan Murray. If anybody missed it, if you're a Hawkeye fan, I know this is a football show, but if you're an Iowa fan and you missed it, Keegan Murray did declare for the draft. No indication that he would have any interest in coming back. It's not a situation where he's trying to gauge stock and then potentially return. He's gone, and that's no surprise. He's going to be a lottery pick, probably a top 5 pick overall. And as much as Hawkeye fans, Mark, wanted to, including myself at times, convince ourselves that maybe there was a chance he'd return, it's the right decision. He's got millions and millions of dollars on the line with this move. It helps Iowa from a recruiting standpoint, I'd have to think, even though I think he would have been a shoe-in as a top 10 pick next year, assuming he stays healthy. The fact that he's going to be a lottery pick and in the NBA helps Iowa. He's the only guy. I mean, Luka Garza and Joe Wieskamp and Tyler Cook, they've all been kind of fringe NBA players early in their careers. But Keegan's not going to be a fringe player, and that's going to help recruiting. So it opens up a scholarship. I know Iowa's active in the portal, so I know this is a football show, though. So if anybody wants to check out my coverage, I've been kind of MIA over the past week, released a podcast. I thought it was an interesting podcast, personally, on Saturday. Just talk a little bit about what did I talk about? Talk a little bit about basketball.
It was interesting.
It was interesting. We talked to Cale Crow, Iowa tackle, who's coming in this fall. Cale Crow from Huxley. So very interesting conversation. Just another Iowa kid who's is going to be hard worker, and he'll get there this summer. So that was an intriguing interview. So if you've missed that, check out the podcast over at From the Hawkeye of the Storm. But as it relates to Iowa football, Mark, Iowa had an open practice. I shouldn't say open practice, but open for a period today with the media. A lot of media members I know were tweeting as they were there and taking pictures and getting some video. There were some interesting tidbits of information, and I guess we can just start from the top. Brody Brecht, who is a pitcher for Iowa baseball, and really the only guy on the roster. We've talked wide receiver. The only guy in the Iowa roster right now that I look at and say, boy, he's that prototypical X guy. But, missing basically the majority of spring practice due to baseball you would think make it hard for him to really gain ground. We've seen Connor McCaffrey, on the basketball front, Mark, try to split between baseball and basketball, and it never worked. And he's basically given up. My understanding is he's basically given up baseball at this point. And a lot of people felt that baseball was the one sport he might actually have a chance of playing professionally in. So it's hard to do it. And I know guys have pulled it off. We've talked about Kyler Murray as an example. But Brody is a really good pitcher. He's in his first year as an Iowa baseball player. But again, he got in some time today, which was good because the baseball game was canceled because of the weather. First of all, credit to Rob Howe of Hawkeye Nation. I'm gathering some of this information from him. He did note that Xavier Wampa looked really good, which is not surprising. Iowa dressed with 4 running backs, the 2 Williams, Hilson, and White. And then there was a note, too, of the players. Let me see if I can find that, Mark. I meant to have this up before we started, but a really laundry list of guys who were missing today's practice due to injury, and that is a concern. See if I can find that. So, yeah, this is according to Rob Howe. Guys, he noticed that we're not practicing today. Nico Regini, starting receiver. Kayvon Merriweather, starting safety. Justin Britt, starting guard. Joe Evans, starting defensive end. Ethan Herkett, Justice Sullivan, and then a number of guys who Justin Jacobs, Jack Campbell, and then several guys who are, I wouldn't say buried on the depth chart, but are not on the depth chart. Bowie, Liddell, Mislinski. That's a long list of guys 1 week in, Mark. And I don't know, maybe some of those guys are just being held out for some reason. I'm not quite sure. Again, this is just, you're getting a tiny, tiny glimpse into what's actually happening there. But if those are all injured players, I would be concerned. Now, we know Myslinski has been dealing with injuries. We know that. I know Ethan Hurkett suffered a pretty serious injury during the season last year, so don't know if he's just still, that injury's not quite healed. But yeah, you don't want to see guys like Reganey, Joe Evans, Justin Britt, certainly Jack Campbell out. Now, how big is spring practice going to be for the development of a guy like Jack Campbell? Probably not real consequential. But it does, when you have those guys out, it's going to affect competition everywhere. And so, maybe it opens the door for someone else to get some time. You heard me mention a couple different linebackers in there, specifically Campbell and Jacobs. So an opportunity for, and Sullivan out, an opportunity for some of the younger guys to get some extended run at that position. So we'll see. It was good to at least get some photos from the practice today and know that Brody was getting some time practicing as a receiver. And I know this is going to be a fun month, Mark, because there's going to be lots of interesting tidbits. I know the media, and I don't really know how much time we need to spend on this before we get to defensive backs, but I did think it was interesting. The media is really good. And first of all, I respect so many people in the Iowa media, but the media is really good about picking and choosing what they tweet about. And I understand it's a business, Mark. You and I both understand getting clicks in 2022 is very important to anything from a digital or social media standpoint. But I did think it was funny, some of the some of the tweets that were deliberately put out there, and I understand it because it's what's on people's minds. I'll give you one. David Eicholt, 247 Sports. I have nothing against David, but he tweeted out, this was Spencer Petras, apparently, talking, a quote from Spencer Petras today when he talked to the media. He said, "When Coach O'Keefe told us the move he wanted to make, my first thought was that I want Brian to take over, so I'm really happy." He also mentioned that the offensive coordinator and the quarterback have to be on the same page, says this enhances that. He also said, and I quote, "I'm too smart of a player to not take more advantage of coverage." There's some other quotes here as well. And it is what it is. He was very, very, I'll just say this, like it or not, Spencer was very, very happy from everything that I read. And I haven't heard this out of Spencer's mouth, but I saw tweets from multiple Iowa media members. It was like, I am so happy that Brian Ferentz is my position coach. So let me get your thoughts, Mark. You're kind of on the outside looking in.
I'm not going to predict that Brian Ferentz will not be an adequate or exceptional quarterback coach, but I certainly agree with your take initially about just the curious choice that it was, considering his background and his inability at this point to produce a productive offense. I too saw a headline here in the last 3 or 4 days along those lines, and it may have been on 247 Sports. I didn't delve into it, but it struck me funny, and I thought, is this legitimate discussion? We both know that the origin of work online, now that we've taken everything that pretty much was in print at what point and taken it online, that even if it's honest journalism, so let's even disregard everything that's motivated by some type of an agenda, okay, whether that be money, political, or otherwise, and let's just take honest journalism, that at this point of football coverage, it's difficult to find much of anything, because even those guys that have access to practice have access to very little of consequence, and they have to go by what is stated to them. and kind of try to read between the lines. Okay, so yes, the competition for clicks it gets more difficult all the time. There are college football channels popping up all the time that I have to compete with. I'm not aware of them, but that I have to compete with. I could only imagine what the number of channels are in existence covering college football today versus what it was 5 years ago. It's probably multiplied 10 or 15 times, I would guess. So they're in the same business. So, and you also know that the origin of content either comes from what comes organically out of the players' mouths versus what they may be led to say. They're typically going to be complimentary unless they have really an axe to grind, and this is very infrequent because especially in spring practice. So if they're asked a certain way, hey, your new position coach, is he doing a good job? Well, they're being led down a path.
True.
And typically, if they're quality team guys, they're going to tend to be complimentary.
But let's be honest, Mark, and I'm not arguing anything you just said, but Brian Ferentz has been the OC since Spencer Petras has gotten here. There's never really been a doubt that Spencer Petras was the starter. So it's like, why wouldn't you say that if you're Spencer? Like, yeah, if I was Spencer Petras, I'd be like, I want the guy who's playing me to continue to be the coach. He obviously has faith in Tony Rasiopi, his private coach out east. He's getting instruction from him, whether he, I don't know the ins and outs of what's happening behind the scenes and what, from a technical standpoint, Brian has learned. He's obviously got a lot to learn. He's admitted that. He admitted that on a recent podcast that he needs to learn. I know Chuck Long. Here's a note, Mark. Chuck Long, I listened to this podcast a week ago, and I'm going to give a shout out to KCJJ. I know some people don't like Pat Hardy, but Pat's been around the business for a long time, Mark. He's done the Iowa beat for a long time, and I understand disagreeing with him on some things. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything, but I'll name him because I'm going to give him a compliment. He had some intriguing interviews on on KCJJ radio, and they do a radio show 3 times a week, an AM station out in Eastern Iowa. And I'll just say this. They had Chuck Long on last week, and Chuck was very, very, very critical of this move by Kirk Ferentz to make Brian the quarterback's coach. Very critical. All right. And said repeatedly that he thought this was a missed opportunity by Kirk. He was asked about and if anybody wants to look it up, we love to have people stay here and get content, but that's a great interview from Chuck Long. Go listen to that over on the KCJJ podcast. But he also was asked about nepotism, and specifically nobody actually asked him, use the word nepotism. The question, I believe, was given to Chuck, basically, how much harder is this situation, Chuck, since Brian is Kirk's son? And Chuck basically went from here and to there in a split second and said, I think there should be a rule enforced, because there's rules all across the country against nepotism. He said there should be a rule. You've got to enforce these rules on nepotism. And he used the word. I don't believe it was KCJJ that used it. It was Chuck Long that brought it up. He called it's flat out nepotism. This is Chuck Long, man. Like, this is a respected guy at Iowa. He's a Heisman Trophy runner-up. He's the most successful decorated Iowa quarterback of all time. He was once, I believe, his first year when Kirk was here in '99. I believe Chuck was the quarterback's coach, actually. And I don't know if he split it with Ken O'Keefe for the logistics of how that worked in '99, but it worked for 1 year and then he left. Now, he's also been an OC. Of course, we know he's at Oklahoma. He went on to be a head coach at San Diego State. And I'm not saying he was a great head coach. The record would argue otherwise, but the guy knows quarterback play. He was also asked during that interview if Brian had reached out to him to pick his brain. Chuck said no. And, one would think, Mark, that you might reach out to a guy like Chuck Long if you're Brian. If Brian has, again, I'm not saying that, hey, Brian Ferentz doesn't know about quarterback play. Brian Ferentz admitted that, Mark, 2 weeks ago. He admitted, I need to learn a lot because I really don't know a lot. Now, you can see that both ways, Mark. You can look at it from the perspective of, hey, why did we hire a guy who doesn't know anything about quarterback play? Or you can look at it from a positive perspective and say, at least he's humble enough and he sounds like he's willing to learn. But he has not reached out to Chuck Long. Now, maybe he's reached out to other people. He's got connections in the NFL, of course, with the Patriots. So maybe he has. Maybe he's reached out to Tom Brady. Who knows? I have no idea. But my point is, he's got to learn from somebody. Now, I want to segue into something else, Mark. You asked me if there's other news to note. I don't think you and I have talked about this, and I haven't addressed it on my channel. I plan on producing content about it on my channel, but let's just talk about it on this channel for a minute. What if I told you that a former, how do I couch this question? I gotta think about this because I want to lead into it in a provocative way, Mark. What if I told you that an offensive coordinator from a Mountain West school, who's the offensive coordinator at a Mountain West school last year, has been hired on the staff for Iowa and nobody's talking about it? Would that be sort of odd to you or intriguing to you? How do you feel about that? If I just told you that flat out.
It's not being talked about, meaning that it was not announced?
No, it was not announced. No, it was asked. Kirk Ferentz, I don't know if it was not asked during the media availability last week, but I know it was reported by Scott Docterman. I actually was told by somebody else right before it was reported, and I had reached out to the University of Iowa and didn't get a response until after it was reported by Scott Docterman. So it's out there, but I'm saying nobody's really talking about it, and like the move just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So I'm just curious. I'll tell you who it is in a second. But if you were to be told that, how would that make you feel? Is that a weird thing? Like, because he's not being hired he's not a position coach here.
It's a weird thing that it wasn't announced.
It was not. He's not even on the prospectus. He's not even on the spring prospectus. And what's weird is the spring prospectus has the analysts. It has everybody on staff.
Yeah.
So I'll just divulge this right now, and I'll talk about it on my channel here this week as well. But I reached out to the University of Iowa because this was brought to my attention. Colorado State offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach John Budmeyer. Okay, I don't know if you know that name, Mark, but he was a QB's coach at Wisconsin prior to moving to Colorado State. Got hired last year under Steve Adazio as the OC and quarterbacks coach at Colorado State. He's on Iowa's staff. And let me tell you something else. We're gonna do some earth-shattering stuff for all you. Got 28 Hawkeye fans on here. That's why I'm gonna talk about it on my channel because hopefully get more people. This is crazy to me. Now maybe I'm just insane, and you can tell me I'm crazy, Mark. He is on staff as a volunteer. He's an unpaid volunteer. And this has not been reported on by anybody. But now call me crazy if you want, but I requested, I filed for an open records request earlier in the week and was told that John Budmeyer, who was the OC and quarterbacks coach last year at Colorado State, he is a unpaid volunteer for Iowa. Okay. Now listen here. Now let me just, for anybody who doesn't know who John Budmeyer is. Okay. John Budmeyer is the son-in-law to a Mr. Andy Hartley. Do you remember who Andy Hartley is? Wisconsin guy. His brothers, Jim and Chuck, were Iowa guys. So there's the connection to Iowa, but he's Andy Hartley's nephew. Okay. Did I say that right? His son-in-law, son-in-law. That's why I'm reporting without anything in front of me, Mark. His son-in-law, okay? He was at Wisconsin on staff. He played at Wisconsin, to my understanding. John Budmeyer played at Wisconsin. He then went last year, was the OC and quarterbacks coach at Colorado State. He was hired March 1st. He was hired March 1st as a volunteer at the University of Iowa. Just explain it to me, Mark. I don't know whether to be happy about it. I don't know how to feel about it. I really don't know how to feel about it.
So somebody who had a pretty prominent position on Mountain West Conference coaching staff and
Yes.
probably earned somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000. Was that a coordinator position? It was not a coordinator position, right?
No, it was.
It was.
According to USA Today, according to what I saw from USA Today, and I can't confirm this because I know USA Today is premium content, but when you Google search something, it'll pop up results. What I saw, the value was he was on staff last year at Colorado State as an OC for $325,000 a year.
Okay, I was going position coach level. Okay, $325,000 a year, and now he's a volunteer. Yeah, that's
unpaid. Mark, I can read you the exact language. Let me pull up the because this is public information. This was what the University of Iowa emailed me this week, and again, I've been just under the weather, and I haven't really been able to talk about it. And I'm looking at the volunteer application, okay, from John Budmeyer right now. So he was hired March 1st. His responsibilities or his volunteer services description are as follows: self-scout, opponent scout, approaching game rosters, injury status, depth chart projections, and other analytics as needed by head coach and assistant coaches. Now, as you know, Steve Addazio was fired, so that it would make sense that he would not have a job there, but he was there 1 year. And I looked at, you look up like Colorado State's passing numbers. They actually weren't that bad. Now, Iowa played them last year. You'll recall that. Centeo was the guy's name. Quarterback for Colorado State was actually decent, and he wasn't great against Iowa. He ran the ball well, but I look up their passing. They were actually middle of the pack. If I recall, like 70s in the country, middle of the pack, much better than Iowa. Middle of the pack passing the football. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, if this guy got hired as an OC and quarterbacks coach at Colorado State, how is he not getting a job somewhere?
So let's take it on face value. His addition is a positive. If that's all we're taking it as, is that we have a coach coming in as an offensive coordinator who produced a top 75 offense at Colorado State, or a top 75 passing game, and he's being added to better talent, and we know what issues the Iowa passing game has had. Okay. Who knows what his financial status is, though, but he's been earning good money for the last few years at least. And now he's technically on the surface, and I'm not in, as I state this, I'm not stating this in a way that there's anything nefarious going on. That's not what I'm leading at. But we don't know what other businesses and things people are involved in. Okay. But as in this role, he's not earning anything. The next thing I go to is that he is being led in a way that possibly he's setting himself up for another position within the organization. Maybe Kirk.
What's the position, though, Mark? What's the position? I mean, I agree. I thought about what you said, but I just can't find myself to figure out what the position is. He was a quarterbacks coach and an OC. They just promoted Brian Ferentz to quarterbacks coach. So what's the position?
You would think that the only position that he would take with any kind of future would be the offensive coordinator position.
Or at the minimum, quarterbacks coach.
Yes.
What Ken O'Keefe was. I don't understand it. I don't get it at all. And yes, in answer to Ed's question, does he get expenses? That is one thing that was added in. He gets expenses covered. So that's his compensation, Mark, is his expenses are covered.
Well, put this together, what Brian had to say about the learning curve, about what he doesn't know. And this could be a way to supplement the lack of knowledge.
Agreed.
And make Brian look a little bit better without him formally having help.
No, I agree. Listen, when I first heard it, I'm thinking, hey, that's good news. We got somebody who has an offensive mind, because I know, like, certain people think I'm just hating on Iowa's offense. Like, it's hard for me to look up and down the roster and see people who have pure offensive minds. Like Ken O'Keefe, at least you could argue he had an offensive mind, Mark, right? I mean, that was what he did. Brian Ferentz is an O-line guy. Kirk Ferentz is an O-line guy.
What's this guy's name again?
John Budmeyer. All right. JONBUDM, was it MYER? But yeah, no, so the thing about it is you would have to think that, yeah, he's here to help the quarterback position. He's here to help Brian Ferentz. But I guess my thing is, Mark, that's good news if you're a fan, I guess. I guess. But it's also confusing because why does he want to be here? What is he getting from being here? Isn't that the more intriguing question with all this, Mark?
Yes. And that's where I started, but then I
Yeah.
quickly went to, we can, meaning Kirk and the Iowa staff, we can supplement and kind of support Brian Ferentz and his lack of knowledge in the position without it being obvious to many. Few were going to do the digging that you and others are, and most of the fan base doesn't read into things to that degree.
Oh, I'm fascinated by it. I love doing the digging on this kind of thing.
Therefore, there's support given to Brian Ferentz, and it's going to help him do his job better.
But again, what's in it for John?
Yeah, I can't.
We just don't have. I don't have. I'd love to. And listen, I'm not taking a shot at John. Maybe I just don't know. I'd love to be able to talk with him. I'm sure that won't happen. I'm sure they won't. The media probably won't get to talk to a guy who's not even technically getting paid. But I mean, you can't pay a guy under the table, Mark. Right?
No, I don't. Well, I wouldn't put it past anyone that I don't know, the things that go on out there that I don't know of. But we have no reason to believe that Kirk would do anything like
absolutely
that.
Not. No, and I'm not implying that at all. But that's what makes it. That's what makes it confusing.
Yeah,
because I have no reason to think that he's getting paid. If the university says he's not getting paid, I trust that that he's not getting paid. And you're not. How are you going to hide that, Mark? Like, he's there. That's going to be a question that people ask. He's on the UI staff directory. You go to the UI staff directory, you're going to find him. And like I said, you just file a records request and you get the information. So I don't know. I see this comment from Vernon. Maybe Kirk's going to retire after this year. Brian Ferentz moves to head coach. A new guy takes his place. The plot thickens. There's lots of ways you can twist this, Mark. It's odd. I don't know. I guess my other thing is, like, I'm not even going to speculate, I guess. I mean, fans can speculate all they want. But if he was the OC at Colorado State, that's a pretty significantly big program, right? That's not, listen, that is not Truman State. All right. It's not Alcorn State. That's a pretty significant program in the Mountain West.
He's at a top 90 program in the country, and he's making $325,000.
According to what I saw. So, I don't know. Very, very intriguing. Maybe it's actually a good thing, because I would have to. Again, he's a former quarterback, Mark. He's coached quarterback, so maybe there's some hope there. I'm not going to say it just changes my opinion completely of the move to make Brian the quarterback's coach and the OC. It's not going to change my opinion completely, but it does. It should give some fans, if fans are looking for something, some layer of hope to grab onto, it should give fans some glimmer of light. Fascinating. It's a fascinating thing.
In a sense, it reminds me of a situation at Florida State and other places where there's a coordinator in place, but the head coach owns that side of the football. Therefore, the coordinator isn't necessarily taking on the type of authority and the type of responsibility that is typically demanded to that position.
Yeah. The only difference is, again, there's, in that situation, everybody's getting paid.
Yeah.
Regardless of title, everybody's getting paid. I just don't understand that. And Ed says, why don't they pay him? I don't know what the rules are on how many guys they can have on staff to pay. So I don't understand it, but
I don't know what those limitations are either. If there is a limitation, and we think that I was possibly met that limit, and that's the reason why, then we immediately anybody that knows of what's going on in college football would immediately go to Alabama and count how many coaches they have on staff, because they seemingly can always hire more analysts.
Yeah, like I'm not again, I want to final thing I'll say in this we can move on. I am not taking a shot at Iowa by any means. For I don't know the details of why this move is happening, why it's in place, but I guess my thinking on it is, if you're Iowa, it'd be like me going to, obviously a much different situation, but as an illustration, me getting somebody, or you, Mark, you're much bigger than I am. You going to get somebody who's a really good video editor, and this video editor says he'll do all your videos for free. Would you have him do that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's free work. Of course.
It's free work.
To do it.
You can do it much better. Yeah. If some top-notch video editor
of
the caliber of Budmeyer came and said, but I don't need anything and don't want anything, people would find that curious. Okay, why is this guy working for you and he doesn't want anything and he's going to do and these videos look 10 times better?
Well, you take it in a heartbeat, but you'd also be like, why are you here? Like, what's in it for you,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't understand, but we can move on. I'll try to provide more information if I can gather some more information on this story, because I do think it's intriguing. Now, maybe some people think we're just talking way too much, we're reading way too much into it. I'm just intrigued by this type of thing, but it could be a positive for Iowa in the end. The bottom line is they need somebody with an offensive mind. This guy seems to have an offensive mind, and he's obviously working with them for whatever reason. He's working with them. Maybe he can be a guy. And I don't know. I mean, is he the best option? I mean, he probably is. I don't know how you can get something like this and not get paid, but I mean, he's a decent option. Like a guy who was an OC and QB's coach. That's not a bad guy to even hire. I wouldn't be mad if they hired him to pay him.
Exactly.
Mark.
I can't even begin to figure out that end of the deal.
Yeah.
The other end of the deal, I think, is I don't want to discredit Brian Ferentz and his ability to hold down that position, but he has made it public that he needs help. He needs knowledge. He needs to grow in the position. They've given him somebody that can support him in that position. Why you just wouldn't hire this guy to fill the position by himself, I don't know.
Just got word. This is breaking news. I know it's not football. Iowa point guard Joe Toussaint has entered the transfer portal. So that's going to make some fans upset. I wish the best to Joe Toussaint. Didn't expect it. He has been an absolute role model and the epitome of being a Hawkeye. I'll say that because he's went through a lot here. He was starting his freshman year, then he was benched, then he started this year, then he was benched. His body language never changed. He brought energy, he brought defense, he brought hustle. That kid, I wish nothing but the best for Joe Toussaint. Disappointed at the move. But they have Desante Bowen come in a 4-star next year. They got Aaron Eulis. I thought Aaron Eulis might actually leave. I would guess he probably is not going to now, although you never know. Very, very disappointing news, but I wish all the best to Joe Toussaint. So figured I'd throw that in there before we move on.
The only connection I can make there is ask if he's a relation to former Michigan running back Fitz Toussaint. That's the best I can do for
probably you. Not. He could be a running back. He's about 6 foot, 5'11", Mark. He could be a running back. Like, he is a ball of fire. And, struggled with his shot at times. But, man, again, he struggled with turnovers. He went so fast. Like, he was known in Iowa for falling down. He just always would fall. His feet would come out from under him. Everybody would always say, like, he must just be – it seems like he's going too fast for his own self. Like, he's just constantly moving, and then he tries to stop. He just can't because he's going too fast. So, anyways, but, sad day. We're losing two really good people today, and Keegan Murray and Joe Toussaint. Those guys have been tremendous representatives of this program. So, but it's the era. It's the same as college football, Mark. It's the era of the transfer portal. The portal has blown up with people. And again, I'm going to be talking a lot about it this week. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel, do that. But the portal is so active. Iowa's active right now going into the portal. That's one thing I like about Fran McCaffrey, Mark. He's going after the big guns. and he's
There
not
you
afraid to
go.
do it. He's not afraid to do it, and
Kirk needs to hang out with him.
Well, you said it, not me, Mark. You said it, not me. I love hearing that Iowa's head coach is going after that, regardless of regardless of status and how many of the big major programs are. For instance, Fardaz Amack from Utah Valley, he's like the #1 center in the portal right now. Gonzaga wants him, Kentucky wants him, Texas Tech wants him. Iowa's in on him hard, and it's because I think Fran just doesn't care. He realizes, hey, this guy would help us. I'm going to go try my best to get him. So I appreciate that as an Iowa guy.
I'll put in my plug for the night at 8:30 Eastern time. I'll be on my main channel, and we're going to go through all-time program rankings. So if you've been following what we're doing here, we've got a series going where we're going Power 5 conferences one by one and going through the all-time program rankings with 10 criteria involved. I will bring the Big Ten rankings to this show here in the next few weeks, and we will dissect where Iowa stands and put it into context. It's just not, of course, something that you just take as, okay, they're 7th, they're this, they're that, but it obviously all has to be placed into context. So we are going to go live when we throw all the numbers together. We've gone through all the Power 5 conferences. Now it's time to look at the top 20. And Iowa fans, a bit of a tease here. Did Iowa finish in the top 20 all-time program rankings? We'll see.
Fringe.
And I'm also working on my coaches'
fringe
rankings. Pardon
me? I said I'm going to predict fringe on the top 20. Be my guess. I could see them falling on either side.
I've also worked on my coaches' rankings. So these are my Big Ten coaches' rankings right here. Where does Ferentz rank?
You going to share that with us?
No.
Okay.
I've not released the video yet.
I'll be intrigued because a lot of people rank Ferentz really low in those rankings.
He used to rank rather high with me, and he's lost some ground.
He's suffering a bit?
A bit.
He's suffering a bit. All right. Yeah, no, definitely. I know Cole, he's in the chat. I know he's a Nebraska fan. We got Nebraska fans listening. So, yeah, definitely check out the show tonight. And I'll look forward to talking about the power rankings, Mark. Or not the power rankings, but the all-time rankings.
Yeah, it's a fun thing, and people that are interested in that sort of thing really get into it, obviously. All right. Now we're going to set up the secondary, which has been a strong unit on this football team for quite some time, of course. And another fine performance last year, leading FBS football with 25 interceptions.
Unfortunately, you lose one of the highest single guys. I shouldn't say that, but one of the higher, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Dane Belton. He led, I think he was, second or third in the country, tied for second or third in the country in total interceptions. I think we looked this up, Mark. He's going to be moving on. He, of course, primarily played at Cash last year. I think we talked about it because Sebastian Castro was listed as the #1 Cash guy heading into the spring. But safety, we talked about Kayvon Merriweather out apparently today for spring practice. So you hope he's okay. But, he's been here long enough to, I would think him being out is going to give some other guys an opportunity. Castro's one guy. Quinn Schulte's another guy who I think we're going to see a lot of this year. Where does Xavier Wampa fit into the mix? Could he end up being the Cash guy at some point? I wouldn't dismiss it. We've talked about Jack Kerner leaving. There's a hole to fill there at safety. But then they get Riley Moss back. You lose Matt Hankins, but you get Riley Moss back. TJ Hall comes in, a guy that I know Don Patterson was instrumental in recruiting. He is enrolled early, so he is there right now, which is great news. But having Riley Moss, and you've got him as a Cash. You're projecting him as Cash. Is this from Daily Iowa?
I'm not projecting anything for anyone.
This is the Daily Iowa.
I will give credit. I typically, of course, any good journalist gives credit to their source, and I will do that at some point here soon.
I think you're probably looking at the track. And I've heard that people think that Moss is going to end up being the Cash guy. I do like their depth at corner because you've got Riley, you've got Terry Roberts, who's been a special teams star throughout his career. I'd love to see him grab a starting role on that defense. You have Jamari Harris, who got a lot of run last year due to injury. And then they have some younger guys. Brendan Diaz-Fernandez is a guy who's been on the roster here for a year, and he'll be back. Or maybe he might have actually been here 2 years. Cooper DeJean is a guy who, Mark, I projected him more, and I know Iowa at one time projected him more as a safety. He's right now listed as a backup corner. I know he filled that role late last year due to injury. I was surprised to see him as a corner. We'll see if he stays there. I think they're probably pretty comfortable. I would guess Phil Parker. First of all, you have confidence in Phil Parker and his ability to figure out where guys need to be on the back end. But they'll figure out a place for Cooper DeJean, who's a great athlete out of Iowa. AJ Lawson is still on the roster as well. Jackson Rexroth, he's there. I believe he was listed on the depth chart. Thomas Hartley. Now, Thomas, bring him up. He's a walk-on, Mark. I believe he's Jim's son. Now, I could be wrong on that, but some legendary status there. And then who am I missing? Kyler Fisher, who's played some special teams. Then they bring in several guys this year in the fall. TJ Hall, I believe. TJ Hall and Wampa are the only two defensive backs who enrolled early. You're going to get Cohen and Tringer. He'll be coming in as an athlete. Will he play safety? I think so. I don't necessarily see him as a corner, although, again, I'm not claiming to be an expert in projecting where guys are going to end up. I would guess he ends up playing safety. And then Alondo Trader is another guy who's probably more of a corner who comes in. They recruited very strongly at defensive back. I mean, between Hall, Wampa, Trader, and Intringer, that's 4 really quality recruits. They flipped 2 of them. I believe both of them were from Central Michigan. So they've got some good depth there. And, we'll see. This spring will be intriguing to see if Wampa emerges as a starter. If the depth chart we get towards the end, I'm assuming they're going to release a depth chart at the end. Boy, you went way out of focus there, Mark. You look like you're in a time warp.
I don't know what to do there. Wow.
Wow. I've never seen that. That's never happened before.
Yes. Pay enough for this camera for it
there
to
you
do
go.
that.
You're starting
I don't know what happened.
I think your camera was starting to fall apart. But lots of depth. I'm not concerned about defensive back. I said the same thing about defensive line, Mark. I'll probably say the same thing about linebacker to give everybody a preview of next week. But they've got lots of depth at both positions. And health is always a concern. You're always going to have, it seems like Iowa, and maybe this is the case everywhere, but it seems like Iowa always loses guys during the season. I mean, just always loses a couple corners, and you end up having to play the 3rd, 4th, sometimes the 5th guy. So Terry Roberts, Jamari Harris, regardless of who starts on that 2nd spot, they got to be ready. Riley Moss missed time last year, and I think you're going to probably see a guy like Diaz Fernandez or TJ Hall. Hall being here early, as you know, Mark, is a huge, huge advantage, getting that time in the spring as a true freshman. I think he could have an opportunity to play, and Phil Parker has shown he's willing to play the young guys, especially true freshmen. We saw it with DJ Johnson. We saw it with Desmond King. He's willing to play them early if they're ready.
So Jamari Harris, to me, based on what I looked at this afternoon, seems to be the guy that I don't know, really could emerge. Started to last year, had a nice stretch drive. So he was pressed into action due to injury, correct?
Correct.
Had a really nice Citrus Bowl game against Kentucky, 4 tackles, 2 pass breakups, and a pick. Only gave up 18 yards to opposing wide receivers. And so there's one player there that you touched upon. So Hawk Central is where I pulled this depth chart projection from. They have Riley Moss at the cash, Jamari Harris, and Terry Roberts at the corner positions, then Kayvon Merriweather and Xavier Wampa at the safety spots.
Yeah, and that may be true. I remember Kirk Ferentz, after the depth chart release last week, he basically said that none of it matters. So, and that's pretty much, I mean, you're going to get these guys, everything's going to sort itself out. That's why you hope most of these guys can stay healthy. That way you can get a real feel. That's the problem with even if you have guys who are hurt and you have guys behind them get extra time, Mark, although that's a positive in one sense, it doesn't really help you sort out who should actually be starting. And so you don't really, I mean, I would think there's going to be a battle in the fall, but you'd have to think the coaches want some of this to shake itself out, especially with that depth. You want to see who's in line for starting snaps. I didn't mention Reggie Bracey. He's another guy who's a sophomore, and then, or excuse me, I believe he's a junior, although he may be a redshirt. Dallas Cradith. That's one of the very intriguing names on the roster, Mark, because he really emerged last year on special teams, helped them a lot. But like he was, I guess I could look up his recruiting status, but he was, I believe, a 4-star by some metrics, maybe a high 3. He had a good offer list coming out of high school, but if I'm not mistaken, he is a senior this year. Let me go up. I'm filtering through the roster here. Yeah, he's a senior out of Missouri. I'm surprised he hasn't entered the portal. And listen, that may be offensive to some people because, oh, well, they should stick it out. That's just not the day and age we live in college football, Mark. If guys aren't playing, they usually end up leaving. Now, I don't want him to leave. I'd love for him to stick it out and earn his education. Now, Iowa's had guys that have done that despite limited playing time. Devontae Young comes to mind. But Cradith has been really, I give him credit because he could have left and he stuck it out. Now, maybe he ends up leaving after spring. We'll just have to wait and see. But would like to see someone like that, like Dallas, be able to take a step and get some time, whether it be at cash or whether it be at safety. It hasn't worked yet, but I think the depth is really good. And when you bring in a freshman class, you don't necessarily expect him to start right away. But when you have 2 of those 4 guys who you were high on, one of which was a 5-star recruit, Wampa, and the other guy, which was, who's previously committed to Arizona, was committed to Washington, came here from Fresno, and TJ Hall, they both enrolled early. I think they're great on depth, and I think that freshman class will factor in at some point.
Join Corey on his channel right here on YouTube from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We appreciate everybody pushing Corey's work there past 1,000 subs here in the last, month?
Yeah, I think we're up to, 1,350 or so. So that's kind of the way it worked with this channel. You hit 1,000 and all of a sudden it gets a lot easier. It's not like pulling teeth. So appreciate everybody subscribing.
Thank you, everyone, for being here as well. We do our Hawkeye show with Corey each and every Tuesday at 4:30 Central. So please join us again next week, but also bring some folks with you as well as we continue to put some perspective and light on spring practice and who knows what other underhanded decisions are being made from week to week. But also we will highlight a position each and every week as well as we get through spring practice. And the spring game is when again?
I think it's April 23rd.
Okay.
I think.
So I am going to go live at least on those 3 middle weeks of April. I've gone through the spring games across the nation, and most of them are being played the 9th, 16th, and 23rd. And so I'm going to go live with all sorts of spring game coverage on those 3 particular weekends and possibly the 30th, depending on who's there. But most of the teams wind up on those 3 weekends. So we will be live on those 3 Saturdays, and we will be live on whatever team channels apply.
The only disappointing thing about that, Mark, and then we can finish. The only thing disappointing about Iowa's spring practice is just that it's a practice. It's very rarely. I don't know the last time they did a formal scrimmage. So I think it's lost a little bit of its luster, but Iowa fans are passionate. They'll be there, and at least you get a glimpse. I'm hoping to be there. We'll see. But yeah, you'll at least get a glimpse, and quarterback's going to be the position everybody's going to be watching.
And again, everyone, I'm going to go live at 8:30 and take your calls, 8:30 Eastern time, and unveil our all-time program rankings. So this is just a statistical measure of 10 criteria. It's been well discussed and debated as I have unveiled conference by conference. Now I throw it all together with Notre Dame and BYU and others outside of the Power 5 to give an all-time program rankings. And I'm also going to, again, those are just metrics. Put it into context and get your thoughts as well.
Look forward to it, Mark, and we'll talk about it next week. I may call your call-in show. I don't know if I'll call tonight, but it's at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Eastern.
8:30 Eastern.
Okay. Well, I won't call you tonight, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah. And then again, we've got all sorts of rankings being released in the next several weeks, and I will bring the Iowa applicable ones over here for some discussion, which should trigger the chat as well, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will.
All right, Corey, appreciate you being here. Everybody head on over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm basketball news today and more on the football practice field as well. Corey, you have a great week. We will see you soon.
Thanks, Mark.